to go over the development chapter. I usually show the development, do the development chapter, and we show the video, Life's Greatest Miracle, on the same day. So we should not have any troubles getting through development in one day. And then we'll try to have a review kind of clinical correlation conference for the last day and see what we can come up with. Okay? Several of us are not here today. We're going to do the Montrose quiz. I would ask you to just not chat about it too much because there's a number of your classmates that are not here. Okay? Questions? All right. We talked about amenorrhea. We talked about secondary amenorrhea, which is usually caused by stress or some other physical or mental problem. Let's talk about the vagina. I had this one little girl in my class, and I say little girl, I'm not referring to her size. I think she was 17. She was a junior in high school, taking 233, and she was really bright, and she studied really hard. She was a student down the street at Westview High School, and when I put this slide up, she could not have turned any more beet red. And a lot of the things that we discussed in this whole last part of the course were just about more than she could take. She just couldn't deal with it. And so I hope y'all will do better. I don't think we have... Are you 17? No. What?
It was anecdotal. I had something kind of to add to that. I got in a discussion with a friend, and she's been a nurse for like the 10 years.
Yeah.
The conversation about the female reproductive system was incredibly intense,
Yeah.
but she would not stop calling the vagina the vajay. And I don't know why
The
it bothered
vajay.
me so much.
Okay, well, I promise I will not call it the J, for fear I might offend someone.
My friend's 3-year-old called it my China. She's
My
like,
China.
it's my China.
All right.
Close enough, kiddo.
Meanwhile, the vagina is an elastic muscular tube. It extends from the cervix to the vestibule. The vestibule is just that word which means outside. It has a length there that is, of course, very distensible, and I'll just leave it at that. The cervix projects into the top of the vagina, and the fornix is that part up behind the cervix that surrounds the cervical protrusion. Remember that the vagina runs parallel to both the rectum in back and the urethra in front. They just all kind of line up there. And as opposed to in the male, where the urethra functions, has a sexual function as well, is in the sexual system uses the urethra. That is not the case in the female. The three openings are separate. The urethra for the urinary system, the vagina for the sexual system, and the rectum for the digestive system and back. The blood supply of the vagina comes in from the sides, comes in from the internal iliac arteries, uterine arteries. Remember, the only thing that's different about the blood supply down here is the ovarian arteries. The ovarian arteries, remember, they came off way up high. They were called the gonadal vessels, and they kind of migrated down. Ovarian vessels come off of the aorta right up near the renals. But that's the only ones. That's the only thing that they supply is the ovaries themselves. Innervation of the vagina is also just from regional innervation. You don't need to know all of this. Just know that it gets its nerves from all the other things that live in that area, along with all of those from the lower levels of the sacrum, hypogastric plexus. What are the three functions of the vagina? Boy, there's a question you ought to ask in any middle school locker room. The passageway for the menstrual fluids to get out. Well, that's certainly an interesting way to think about it. It is also the place that receives the spermatozoa during sexual intercourse, and finally, it forms the inferior portion of the birth canal, the route out for the baby, which always seems amazing to me that it can do that. The vaginal wall is very, has lots of blood vessels. It has lots of cervical glands, lots of vaginal glands, and it can be, and these glands can secrete a huge amount of fluid when stimulated, allowing a lot of water to move across this permeable membrane, permeable epithelium, to help with that. The hymen is something that I think should be limited to medieval literature. The hymen is kind of an elastic epithelial fold. To be honest with you, I did thousands of pelvic exams in my career, and I'm not sure I ever saw one. I'm not really sure what it would look like if I was to see one. The hymen is a little epithelial fold that partially blocks the opening to the vagina, and throughout ancient history it was described as the thing that told you whether someone was a virgin or not. The problem is that's pretty silly because the hymen is such a tiny little thing. It's totally knocked out of the way and destroyed by the insertion of a tampon. It's totally destroyed by an examination down there. It says it can be ruptured by sexual intercourse. I don't suspect there's too many hymens that are ruptured by that, but I'll just leave that to the Shakespeares of the world. The vagina has some muscles, bulbo. I should say more than that. It's also interpreted as a really big deal by some religions around the world. You know, women are shunned and women are discriminated against if they can't prove, I guess, that they still have their hymen. I mean, give me a break. But anyway, I'll just leave it at that. Vaginal muscles, the two bulbospongiosus muscles run along either side of the vaginal entrance. Now remember, we had bulbospongiosus tissue in the male and these same muscles in the male. There are little bulbs that are masses of erectile tissue that lie beneath the muscles and have the same embryologic origin as the corpus spongiosum. So, you know, there are tissues down there around the vagina that become stiff and become erectile that are important in female sexual arousal as well. This is the histology of the vagina. I personally don't think you need to worry too much about it. You might look at the slides. Basically, on the outside, you would figure it has a stratified squamous epithelium. It is not skin. If it was skin, it would be cornified, but this is non-cornified. And remember, the stratified squamous epithelium is the type of epithelium that lines any body cavity entrance. So the mouth, the nose, the rectum, the vagina, the urethra, all of them, at least the last little bit of them before they come out and open to the skin, are aligned by the same stratified squamous epithelium. And I would just leave it at that. So this is, this is epithelium from here up. This is the basement membrane right at that level. Underneath it, there's a lot of blood vessels. There's a lot of glandular tissues, bundles of smooth muscle. I love talking about this. My mother, excuse me, not my wife, my mother, as I was a young boy growing up, I always remember that in our bathroom there was like an IV pole, and at the top of that IV pole was this rubber bag that was about this big, and you put water in the top of it, and then it had a big hose coming out the bottom of it, and it had a little clamp on it that you clamped off, and then it had a little nozzle on it that was about that long and had a bunch of side holes coming out of it. And that, it had a name of a company by the name of Massengill Corporation on it, and Massengill Corporation was basically the company that made douchebags, and that's what a douchebag was. And the reason I tell that story is because the Massengill Corporation totally hoodwinked the women of the United States and said, by God, you need to kill all those vaginal bacteria, and so by God, you better douche. And when women said, well, oh, how often should we douche? Every time you have sex, every time you have a period, every time you have a cold, every time, anytime you need to douche. Well, all they were doing was selling basically bleach, I think is what it was. It was a chemical. And you poured a little chemical in there, and my mom did it religiously, and mixed it up and poured in warm water so it was relatively warm, not freezing, and would run that in. But the point of the matter is, and that's the point of this slide here, is it has a population of totally harmless bacteria. There's nothing in there that needs to be an issue, and certainly nothing that needs to be cleaned out. There's nutrients down there that can help bacteria grow, but you need it, really. You need it to be an acidic environment down there. And really, most pathogens are very much restricted from growth in the vagina by just the natural flora of the vagina. Another study that's come and gone, really, is what's called a vaginal smear. These are not done anymore, I do not believe, anywhere. But basically you used to take a little scraper and scrape a few cells off the inner lining of the vagina, look at them under the microscope, and depending on what they looked like, it helped you diagnose which state of the ovarian cycle you're in. So for ladies who were trying to get pregnant and they wanted to know, exactly when they were going to ovulate, it might have been a little bit of help. I really don't think so. Probably better help is simply taking your temperature every morning. We'll talk about that in a bit, and paying attention to when you had your last period. So I would say vaginal smears have pretty well gone the way. The vulva is the outside parts of the female genitalia. That vestibule is kind of the space in between the two labia minora on either side. The labia minora are the small labia. They're covered with hairless skin, and the urethra opens into the vestibule. It's just anterior, really, to the entrance to the vagina. And because of this line right here, I'm just going to tell you that one of the hardest things you'll ever do, and kind of one of the almost comical things you'll ever see, is when a really heavy lady comes into the emergency room, for example, and needs to have a catheter placed. Well, in order to do that, you've got to be able to see the opening of the urethra. You just flat have to see it. And so I'm sure I've seen this scene 50 times. But you've got one nurse on the right leg over here, and you've got one nurse on the left leg over here, and you've got one nurse down the middle with gloves and mask and everything on, and has the urethra in her hands. And then usually there's even two more nurses that are kind of holding the folds of fat back. And one of them might be holding a flashlight because it's hard to see down there in the dark parts of that. And so everybody has to work together to expose the urethra. And it's a really tough job. And I'm not kidding you. It's a serious job. But once you see it, once you see the opening of the urethra, you've got it. And you can just put it in and it slides right in. Daisy came up to me this morning, just at the beginning of class, and said she had just put her first catheter in a male. And I was going to use the story on Daisy, but hers was a male that she put in. And it's easier to find the urethra on a male. It's just kind of right there at the end of the penis.
Do you ever watch Orange is the New Black?
What?
The show Orange is the New Black?
I have not seen that.
There's an episode in one of the later seasons called The Third Hole.
Oh my gosh.
All these women are like, what do you mean? That's where pee comes out of. There's 3 holes.
Yeah.
You should watch that episode for nothing else.
Maybe I'll put a piece of it in
It's
my
great.
PowerPoint.
It's great. It's one of the funniest episodes.
Alongside the urethra, near the opening of the urethra, there are several sets of glands that secrete a mucus and lubricants called Skene's glands. I would only say from a general surgical point of view, I operated on a couple of ladies in my career who came in to see me. I don't know why they came to see me instead of gynecologists. But they had little abscesses that had formed in these glands here. And it's just a red boil, basically. And when ladies have had that, they've been treated with antibiotics and it's cleared up, and they come back, usually what you do is just go in and remove the whole gland. It's not a big deal. It's a little half-inch long incision and just take out the lump so that they don't keep getting it infected. But those are called paraurethral glands. Clitoris is a small protuberance up front in the vestibule. It has the same embryonic structures as the penis. It even has a prepuce or a hood over the front end of it to kind of protect it. This is where the business of female mutilation occurs in a lot of countries around the world. They think that must be a bad thing to have any extra tissue up there, and so they've worked it into their. I don't even want to call it a religious ceremony, but I guess in some places.
Ceremony?
What?
Cultural ceremony?
Yeah, maybe a cultural ceremony, but they basically remove the whole area, which then makes it so that the woman can never have an orgasm.
Yeah.
And hopefully, I guess what the males of the crowd are thinking is, well, we don't really care whether the women have any fun at sex. It's really just for us, right? And if we can do this, we can control the whole situation. So that's what this. It's usually just called female mutilation these days, and it's terrible because ladies actually bleed to death from it in places, and it's just so sad. The vestibular glands, lesser and greater, secrete fluids alongside of the vaginal entrance. I think we have a picture here that shows where they are. The mons pubis is the mound up front. Labia majora are the largest lips, labia meaning lips, majora meaning the major ones. They're the outer ones. They are covered with hair. They have lots of sebaceous glands, basically your old sweat glands, and apocrine sweat glands. Remember those guys, which were only found in a few places in your body, in the nipples, and I think under the arms and in the pelvis, or in the groin some places. So here you have, they secrete onto the surface of the labia majora. Here's a picture of this sort of stuff. This is where the hymen would be if it was in present. It would be a little bitty flap of tissue extending across here, which, like I said, is usually gone very early in life, and doesn't carry near the significance that some of the old authors and some of the old writers used to make of it. The clitoris is up here in front. This is the glands of it. The prepuce is up here in front as well. Here's the urethral opening right there, and as you can see, it's pretty hard to get to. In a young, thin lady, it's not hard to see. One person can do it on their own with just fingers and spreading. One finger here and one finger there, just spreading. You can see it and drop the catheter right into the bladder there. But in heavy ladies, I mean, sometimes just separating this structure, this thigh from that thigh, is a four-man job. And I just know that there's no time when you really want to have an experienced nurse around than at that time, because you don't want to have to expose it twice. You want to get it right the first time and get it in and be done with that little procedure. Let's talk about the breasts for a minute. They're obviously part of the reproductive system. Mammary glands, we call that lactation. Remember, we're called mammals because we have mammary glands and we nourish our babies with milk. They're very specialized organs of the integumentary system. They are controlled by the hormones, and they basically lie in fat on your chest. In general, ladies have 2 nipples, one on each side. I'll show you pictures of more. That does occur from time to time, and it's usually not a big deal, but they usually want to get them removed. The nipples, their job is to carry the milk from where they're manufactured in the breast tissue itself out to the surface. The areola is the brown area around each nipple. The thing to know about the areola is if you ever want to know whether some lady has ever been pregnant, at least if they've carried a pregnancy to the 8th or 9th month, you can look at their areola and you'll know, because usually the areola during your first pregnancy will get a lot darker and it will stay that way the rest of your life. It doesn't come back in general. So I just throw that little tidbit out there to you. The mammary glands they seem like they would be very simple, and they really are, but they're also a sleeping giant. For 99% of your life, they don't do anything. They aren't even there hardly. You can hardly find them under the microscope. It's only when you lactate, if you're going to breastfeed your baby, and maybe for the last 3 weeks of pregnancy, and for the time when you're breastfeeding, that they really get bigger and actually start making milk. I'll show you some pictures in a minute. The breasts have suspensory ligaments, which are nothing more than bands of connective tissue that kind of hold the breast up on the chest. I would refer to those as the perkiness ligaments. If you have lots of perkiness ligaments, your breasts are kind of perky. Us men would probably describe that as high beams. As opposed to low beams. It's good to see some of you smile.
That's like nipples on, nipples off.
Yeah.
That's
Anyway, these suspensory ligaments run all the way up to the chest wall and into the pectoralis major to kind of hold everything up there. And I'll just leave it at that. The blood supply to the mammary glands comes off of the chest, right up through the chest from the internal thoracic artery. If you ever get to see a mastectomy, you'll notice that as they finally, in the last stages when they're actually taking the breast off, the blood supply to the breast comes up through the chest muscles. And you got to cut, clamp, or clamp, cut rather. The mammary glands, there's a series of ducts. The nipple itself has about 15 little holes in it. That connects there's one from each of the 15 lobes or so of your breast tissue. And they come up and they form a single lactiferous duct from each lobe. And that single lactiferous duct then goes to the nipple and is the opening where the milk actually comes out. There's kind of a little sinus, a little expanded chamber there just under the skin, and this says 15 to 20 of these little sinuses to each nipple. But basically the whole idea with these little chambers is that way when the baby sucks on the nipple or pushes on the breast, the milk comes out. It just kind of squeezes it out and makes it easier for the baby. The baby doesn't really have to suck it out. It just has to stimulate the nipple, push on it a little bit, and out it comes. Yeah?
So when a new mother's having a hard time with breastfeeding, I hear that's like really common.
That they have troubles? Yeah.
Is that just because the baby's having a hard time like pushing on it right, or the glands are just like kind of...
Boy, somebody help me out here.
Oh, I got this one. I've been doing so much research.
It's a hard, I'm going to just answer it and let you get answers from other people. But it is a hard thing. I think it's hard emotionally. My mother tried to breastfeed me. I was the oldest child. She tried to breastfeed me, and she said I just wouldn't do it. And then she got all freaked out that she wasn't a good mother, and she wasn't making enough milk, and my baby was going to die. And look where I came out. You know, I weighed enough in the end. But the point being that it is a really, it's a tough time. I mean, you've just had a baby, you've got this terrible pain down in your pelvis, most likely. You may have had a C-section, and here now they're throwing this baby at you saying, here, you're responsible, feed this baby, make this all work. And it is a hard thing, and I think everybody's very different, and I think, you know, hospitals and women's organizations have really stepped up, and you know, the Leche League and all this, there's lots of counseling available. And I think it's important. I think it's really important because it is a tough time. And, you know, I would also, if I can say one thing from a totally male perspective about breastfeeding, because my babies were both breastfed, and there's nothing more exasperating as the father, and you're trying to be the good father, and you're trying to get up with the baby, and you're trying to change the diapers, and you're trying to do all this crap. But let me tell you, if you don't have the breasts, you can't make the baby shut up a lot of times. And so it's like, well, honey, I'd go in there, but I can't make Steven stop crying, but you can. You know, and so it becomes a real alienating issue from the male's point of view. And if you ever hear someone that's just totally over the top, saying that breastfeeding is the greatest thing in the world and how that's the way it was supposed to work and every woman ought to work and work and work and work and make it so that it works, remember that that's a bad deal for the husbands. And there's not really anything too wrong with a bottle once in a while.
There's been a lot of shaming.
What?
Yeah, the
There's
breast
a lot
is
of shaming about women if they don't
Right,
breastfeed.
and it's
like,
not,
wrong.
it's
Then
just,
because you do, and people are like, cover your baby. Like, your
Yeah,
boobs out
it's-
in public. But
yeah,
how dare
well,
you
there's
not
lots of
breastfeed?
issues that I'm not going to discuss here in A&P, but I would just tell you from a father's point of view, I liked when the babies were breastfed because I got some sleep. And I didn't have to get up with them at night, but it did make you feel not as close to the child as the mother did. There's no question that mother-child bonding over a breast is a pretty cool deal. I kind of wished mine worked.
Just take one restroom and you'll be fine. Make more.
Just
Try
about
harder,
twice,
Just try
maybe
harder.
3 times. After that was enough.
Keep trying until you make it work.
Yeah, there you go. Anyway, the thing from a A&P point of view, you have to remember that the active mammary gland, and this is only true of the active mammary gland, it's a tubulo-alveolar gland, which means it has little tubes and a little bunch of little alveoli up there, and they're all making milk, and they're contributing, and it's coming down these tubes out of these little cul-de-sac kind of things. And but this stuff here never develops unless you're lactating, unless you're breastfeeding your baby, or like I said, the last few weeks of pregnancy. Okay. So, what does that mean? Well, from one point of view, it means that breasts and the size of breasts has absolutely nothing to do with the amount of breast tissue in them. The size of your breasts depends 100% on how much fat you have in them. And some women who have enough estrogen and have enough fat will put it right there, and they think that's great, and guys think that's just great as well. But the fact is that until you're lactating, the breast tissue, the actual tissue that makes milk in your breast, is minuscule. It is like 1% of the total volume of your breast. Okay? So none of these glands mature at all. They don't even develop until pregnancy occurs. This is an example of a lactating breast. This is one that's actually working. Here's those suspensory glands I mentioned earlier. These are the lactiferous ducts that come up here and dump out into the nipple, right around the edges of the nipple. There's 15 or 20 holes in the nipple. And if you ever have the opportunity to lactate, you can probably squeeze the nipple and you can see all 15 of them. They kind of open up. Each of them dribbles a little bit of breast milk out. So here's,
horrifying, by the way.
what?
That was horrifying when the nurses come in and they have you,
Have you squeeze and look and you like,
And you expect one
yeah,
gland of milk and it's like,
yeah, it's a fire hose
It's
going in all directions. It's,
startling.
that was a good comment. I've never heard that one before, but that's a true statement, Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that we used to do occasionally was we would have a lady come in, usually not lactating, but she was having a little blood come out of her nipple.
Oh.
And most of the time when blood is coming out of the nipple, it's not a cancer. It's usually a benign growth in the breast. But you had to figure out where it is. And it'd be nice if you could just take a mammogram and see it, but a lot of these things are pretty small. And so what we would do is get them on the exam table with really bright lights, and you would squeeze the nipple, and you could usually see exactly which duct the blood was coming out of. And if you could do that and then numb the area up a little bit, we had a little blunt probe in our office that you would put into that particular duct right up here, and usually you'd feed it down, and then that would direct you as to which way to go. And oftentimes you would bump into the growth, the tumor, right down here, and then you would just stop, move them into the operating room, clean it off, numb up a little half-inch long incision, go in there and take the lump out. But that's about the only time I ever really saw any real use for all those little holes. But it was nice if you could localize exactly which one it was coming from. The nipple is this little part here. The areola is the brownish area around it. I'll leave that at that. So this is what it looks like under the microscope. This is what it looks like for 99% of your life. Right here you can see that those glands are just sitting there not doing a damn thing, and they take up almost no room in your breast. But then once you start lactating and making milk, it looks like this. It's a forest of cells making milk. And all of these are alveoli that are filling up with milk, and then there's big ducts that run through the breast to carry the milk up to the nipple. Make sense? Pretty striking difference, I think. This is what a mammogram looks like. This is an older kind of mammogram. They've even gotten better, but I think all you have to do is look at one of those and realize how valuable mammograms are to the diagnosis of growths in the breast, because you can see almost every little thing in there. These are just fibrous streaks. These are suspicious.